my friend Ryan's 21st birthday, I threw him a surprise party at my house. I invited all of our friends in our group, plus some acquaintances and friends of friends who were brought along. My parents weren't home for the night, so it worked out nicely. The peak of the night was when Ryan walked in the door and all of us got to scream surprise. It was a Friday night, so mostly everyone drank a decent amount. I tried not to get too drunk, just so I could stay alert in case anyone was doing something dumb in my parents' house. We had cake and other desserts set up for Ryan too. I did a lot of walking around offering cake and beers to everyone, even people I'd never met before, including one guy with long blonde hair and a football shirt sitting on my couch, and some dude who looked a few years older sitting on my grandma's old rocking chair that she gave to my mom. I whispered into Ryan's ear at some point that half these random dudes that our friends brought over looked either kind of creepy or odd. He agreed with me, a bit over-enthusiastically, but that's probably because he was a lot drunker than I was. The night progressed and everyone got drunker, and everyone was doing increasingly silly and dumb things. The guy who was still in the rocking chair started to hum a song really loudly and obnoxiously. The rest of us just watched and found it hilarious for some reason. Then the guy with the long blonde hair started to sing a completely different song, and everyone else kind of just joined along. It was a room full of drunk 20-something-year-olds singing very loudly. It was a fun time, but eventually it had to end, and people started leaving one by one as they sobered up. A couple of people stayed the night because they were too drunk to drive, including Ryan and our friend Sean. I slept in the living room with them. We left the TV on, with the movie The Hangover on in the background. I suddenly thought to ask the two, who were those two guys who had been in the living room on the couch and in the rocking chair most of the night? Sean said the guy with the long blonde hair was a friend of one of our other friends, but as far as the guy in the rocking chair, neither of them had a clue. I decided to text everyone in the group chat we had made prior to the surprise party to find out who was friends with this creepy dude in the rocking chair. One by one, our friends said they had no idea. It seemed everyone assumed he knew someone there, but apparently that wasn't the case. I was waiting on two more friends to answer, but I was pretty sure one of them had to have known him. Anyway, Sean and Ryan fell asleep quickly, so I decided to go to sleep too. I woke up an hour later though, I guess to the sound of the TV. I checked my phone, which was sitting on my chest. There were a bunch of texts from the group chat. To put it short, every single person in the group chat said they had no idea who that was. I sat up to let that sink in better. Some random, creepy-looking older dude snuck into my house and hid in plain sight for hours. I suddenly looked around the living room, lit up by the glow of the TV. I felt as if my entire house was unsafe and that we weren't alone. I quietly stepped out from the living room towards the kitchen. I went over to the tiny hall that separates the kitchen from the 3 bedrooms on the first floor, still using the glow from the TV in the living room as my light source to navigate. I think because I didn't want to draw attention, I guess. I stepped into the hall and froze. I was pretty sure I could see something at the end of the hall. It was too dark though. I took a couple steps forward, and it became more clear that there was a person standing there at the end of the hall. Then to make it even worse, I heard a faint, low, cackling kind of laugh at the far end of the hall. I slowly backed away without acting fazed at all. Meanwhile, I felt like my heart dropped to my stomach. I got back to the living room and shook my two friends awake. I whispered to them that someone was in the house with us. I got on the phone with the police and talked as low as I could into the phone so that the woman on the other end could still hear me. And as I was on the phone, I saw the creepy guy from earlier, the guy who was on the rocking chair all night, suddenly walk out to the living room, look at us sitting there, passed us, and walked out the front door. I was literally frozen. I think my friends were too. I told the 911 operator that the intruder just left my house. She said lock all the doors and we should be fine. A cop came by for a few minutes just to check in. After he left, my friends and I found a trail of blood stains on the carpet in the hallway. The stains led to the end of the hall, where I saw him standing. Then it just stopped. Needless to say, no sleep was had that night. I'm I'm sure we all have those memories from our childhood that make us uncomfortable to think about. How we were so young and innocent and unknowing to something bad that was about to happen. I was in the first grade. It was either a Friday or Saturday night. All I know is we didn't have school the next day. My friend's mom set up a little party for his birthday at a local bowling alley. All his friends and their parents were there, and we were sectioned off into different lanes to play with different groups. I wasn't having a lot of fun, mainly because I stunk at bowling, and still do to this day. I remember complaining and crying to my mom that I didn't want to play anymore, and I think one of the kids started taking my turn for me. There was a back room sectioned off for the party with a bunch of snacks, sweets, and sodas. So while my mom was talking to some of the other parents, I think that's when I snuck to that back room to fill my stomach with cupcakes and other sweets. There was a door leading to the outside in this room. It led to the back of the building, I guess. And the next thing I remember was the moment a man was standing at the doorway telling me to come outside and check something out. To this day, it still makes me cringe, thinking back and remembering that I actually listened to the random man and went out there. Upon stepping outside, the man knelt down to my level so that we were face to face. Then he pointed at a truck that was running, maybe 5 yards away. I remember he said he had the rest of the sweets and snacks in the back of his truck, and he needed help unloading it. He also offered to give me a $20 reward if I helped him. Now, I'm sure in my 6-year-old mindset, I was thinking about how cool I'd look, and how jealous all the other kids would be. I followed the man to his truck. He opened the back door for me, and pointed at a big black plastic bag sitting in his back seat. I climbed into the truck, and the next thing I remember was the horrific, ear-piercing scream of a woman. It was my mom, standing at the back doorway of the bowling alley, screaming my name over and over. I ran to my mom, who grabbed me and held me tight as I heard the sound of tires skidding out, followed by a truck speeding away. I turned to look, and the truck was already gone. My mom was in tears, scolding me. A few other parents and kids came out, and it turned into a huge scene. It was a traumatizingly embarrassing experience for me. The bowling alley had to shut operations for the night, and the party had to be cut short. I've asked my mom about this story so many times. She said the police arrived after my dad picked me up, and my mom told the police everything I told her. She also got a decent look at the man and his truck, so she gave a description to the police as well. Unfortunately, nothing was ever heard as far as the police catching him. All I have to say is, if any of you are parents, burn the phrase "don't talk to strangers" into your kids' heads. For my son's 12th birthday, my wife and I threw him a little party in the backyard. We invited the whole family, as we usually did for any of our kids' birthdays, and let him invite all of his friends too. We live in rural New Jersey, so our backyard connects to forest on 2 sides. We also have a pretty big property, which allowed us to space out a bunch of tables on the grass with food and refreshments. The little party went into the night. Most of our guests left, but closer family and some of our friends stayed late. It was probably 8 o'clock. The mosquitoes were out in full force, so I decided to run over to the shed at the far end of the backyard by the woods to fetch the tiki torches. I grabbed like 6 torches and set them on the grass while I went back in to look for fuel. However, while I was in the shed, I heard steps in the woods. I stopped what I was doing to take a look out there, but honestly, it was just too dark to see out into the woods. After finding the fuel, I went back to the part of the yard everyone else was at and pitched the torches into the ground. The 6 torches gave off a decent amount of light while keeping us safe from the blood-sucking pests. There were about 6 kids left, including my son, and they all wanted to play hide-and-seek in the woods. My wife and I allowed it, just making sure to tell them to stay close to the tree line. My son and his friends went to play their little game in the woods, which left the rest of us to sit in peace for a little bit. It was a solid 15 minutes of talking with relatives and hearing the kids laughing and yelling in the near distance out in the woods. But all of a sudden, the yelling turned to screams, concerning-sounding screams from the kids. All of us looked at each other, sitting up in concern. The kids one by one came running out of the woods, yelling that there's something in there. We don't have bears or any big predatory animals around here, so that was not the first thing we assumed it to be. I told all the kids to stay near the patio area. My brother Dom and I, being the biggest men there, decided to go investigate. We took a couple flashlights and off we went into the pitch black woods. The only sounds we heard around us were crickets and other night bugs. So we went deeper, and that's when we started to hear something else. It sounded like an animal at first, but as we followed the sound to get closer, the sound started to become more human-like. We continued to walk, and we agreed we both had the feeling that we were being watched, like stalked. I put my arm out to stop Dom. Standing in the silence now, the best way I could describe the sound we were hearing was a moaning, angry kind of sound. It sounded human, but it was a bizarre sound. Then, a few cracks of the leaves on the ground ahead of us. We aimed our lights over there, and there was someone or something behind the tree. The moaning sound stopped. Dom stepped forward and called out. What happened next was textbook horror movie stuff. A scream, so loud, so blood-curdling, so inhuman, filled the air. I'm sure it could be heard for miles. Dom and I turned and booked it back to the property. We waved at everyone to go inside when we made it back. Dom got on the phone with the sheriff's department. They said it was probably a wild animal. We wanted to insist it was a human, but we honestly couldn't. We to this day don't know who or what we saw and heard in those woods, but it was definitely stalking us and the kids when they were playing hide and seek. And that scream we heard, it just didn't sound human to us.